On today's video, I'm going to speak about why in general I don't like big companies, but the exceptions that I see out there. Now on Friday, I needed to get my laptop fixed and I went to the Apple store and it reminded me of some of the good things about Apple. Now don't get me wrong, a lot of my IT geek friends say, oh, Apple's overpriced, it's not as good as Android, it's not as good as this, it's not as good as that. But one thing I would say, which is a positive about Apple, is that you get certain service. I can remember a number of years ago, I bought a phone in Cambodia from an entrepreneur who's got a phone company not only in Cambodia but in Malaysia and 1 or 2 other countries. I do like supporting small and medium-sized firms compared to big firms in general. That's usually my instinct. But when it came to something like electronics, I realized the negative of that, because when something wrong happened and my phone was broke and I wasn't in Cambodia at the time because I wasn't actually living there, I bought it when I was on holiday, it wasn't possible to get it fixed anywhere in the world. And also their policies weren't as clear as Apple. If you compare that to Apple, I bought the laptop in a third country. I got it fixed on Friday, or I went to the Apple store on Friday. It was in the gray zone of, is the warranty still allowed or not? And yet they fixed it free of charge in 48 hours. So Friday to Sunday, over the weekend, they fixed it in 48 hours, which is absolutely fantastic. So in that case, when it comes to electronics, there is a benefit of using a company which is in almost every country in the world, because when it comes to something which is like hardware or something which is a physical object, it can't usually be fixed remotely. Now, I'm not an IT person, and yes, some things can be done remotely. I think like diagnostics or whatever, people can on the call centers help you with commands. I called the Apple call center and they tried to run diagnostics, but of course some things need to be fixed in person. So if you've got a problem with your screen on your phone or indeed your laptop keyboard, that actually needs to be fixed in person. So using a big firm, which is all around the world, is key, and Apple are quick, as I said, 48 hours even over the weekend. In comparison, what I find in most industries, and finance is a great example of this, is the bigger firms tend to be slower, they tend to be more expensive, they tend to be reliant on brand names. So when I look, let's start with bank accounts to start with. My experience of the likes of TransferWise, Revolut, is that they're miles better than the traditional banks like the Barclays, the HSBCs and so on. All my clients who have had the same banks have said the same thing. They're much superior in many, many ways. There can be some benefits of some traditional banks, but in general, the challenger banks are actually better. A lot of the boutique banks are actually better as well. Not just that, when it comes to something like insurance, even if you just want pure health insurance, a lot of the more boutique players are better. And not only that, more specialized as well. And also when it comes to financial services, a lot of my clients also invest with some of the banks. But eventually a lot of them actually take the money out because they realize my service is quicker, it's more efficient and so on. I can remember I had one client who invested half with me and half with a bank. And he told me that the bank, it took them literally 2 or 3 months to actually start investing the money because they had to put it through a compliance department, they had to do this, they had to do that. In comparison, if you've got a boutique specialized company, speed is much more king, right? You can do things much more quickly. If me as an entrepreneur, I can just say, right, I'm going to do this and I'm going to execute. What I found is, and tech is an exception, the big tech firms have got big because even though they're big, they can do things quickly, efficiently, remotely, and so on in many areas. However, in general, most bigger firms, they start to become slow and they start to care about protecting themselves as opposed to the customer. So a lot of the time they'll start to do more compliance, but in reality, a lot of that compliance is just to actually protect them, to say, oh, you signed and on section 1E or 1F it says such and such terms and conditions. So a lot of people are quite naive about this. They think bigger firms, it's safer. But actually, if you look almost anywhere on the internet when it comes to customer feedback, big firms on average have lower customer feedback. And in addition to that, because of all their practices, it's a misconception to think you have recourse just because it's a big company, because of course there's more compliance, there's more terms and conditions, which most people don't read. So I found the same thing in many other areas of life. When it comes to traveling, I found some of the boutique hotels have been better than the typical 5-star hotels. And I could go on and on and on. So I think also a key point is specialization, right? I know a big firm, they can have different departments. They can have the high net wealth department, they can have the expat department, they can have this, they can have that. But a big firm, by definition, it's almost like buying eggs, right? You've got class A eggs, class B eggs, class C eggs. If you go to the bank, they're going to say, right, are you an adventurous investor? Okay, portfolio A. Are you conservative? Okay, portfolio C. And that's quite typical. Obviously, I'm simplifying and exaggerating a bit, but you know what I mean. In comparison, if you go to a smaller or boutique company, they're going to be more specialized in doing what you want them to do. So for example, if I want to recruit someone, what's going to be better? A global recruitment firm that is all things to all people, or a firm which is specifically tailored to my niche in the market? Likewise, for my customers, most of them come to me because they know I'm specialized in the expat niche and people who are locals who want to go overseas. So people who are looking for cross-border portable advice, in other words, they can take their account with them all around the world. And that's the same, I think, for most industries. Big firms are not particularly good at being very specialized in one particular area. And I think as an economy gets more developed and people get more discerning, specialization is very, very good and important for people. Even when you think when we're a consumer, I'm sure we've all been to those kind of bars or restaurants or cafes, and they just specialize in just one thing and they do one thing brilliantly. And that's usually better than going to Starbucks, for example. And so I'm not saying I'm against all big firms, but in general, what I've found is, with one or two exceptions, there are a lot of negatives about big firms, and firms that get too big, often they lose the good things. So what's going to be interesting in the future is the likes of TransferWise, Revolut, all those kind of firms, hopefully because they're a technology firm, they're going to keep those good things about them as they keep getting bigger and taking market share off the big traditional banks. But as they get bigger, there's always a danger that they're going to revert to more what the other guys do. They're going to become slower, they're going to become more conservative. And likewise, I can remember about 6 months ago, I had a dinner with a couple of clients, and one of the clients said to me, well, one thing I'm a bit afraid of, Adam, is right now you're always on WhatsApp, I can always contact you. It's so much better than being with a big firm, but as you get bigger, could that be lost, right? In other words, will you just palm things off to an admin person or whatever? And I'm a bit concerned about that. And I think that gets to the heart of the way I think as well when I deal with providers. I actually don't like it when a provider gets too big unless I'm reassured that the good things about a very successful boutique company are going to be maintained once they become bigger.